Hey there, listeners. This is the National Land Podcast, episode number 147. My name is Mac Christian, and I am the Chief Marketing Officer here at National Land Realty and the host for this podcast. Now, today is a topic that I have actually bumped in front of quite a few other podcasts that we have recorded. In case you don't know, we go out, we record podcasts as we get topics, and we sort of juggle them around as we feel current events dictate. And this one is, it's pressing right now. We're headed into what we call wildfire season. It's August 1st today, actually. But this is the month that sort of starts off every year where wildfires tend to really take off. And today we're talking to one of the nation's top specialists in wildfires, Terry Severson. Now, the questions that we posed to him, all the questions that I posed to him are, why do California wildfires seem to be increasing? Why do West Coast wildfires seem to be increasing? And I take it from the perspective of the conversations that I have at work. I work with a lot of people on the East Coast and in the South, and I get a lot of feedback on forest management from people that I talk to that manage forests out there. And so I pose the questions as I receive them, which is, why do you guys do this out West? I build the conversation like that. Terry answers because Terry knows more than most humans alive today why those wildfires keep happening. This is an enormously informative episode with actual solutions and talking about the problems that we are facing. Now, sit back and enjoy for a spectacular podcast. Thank you. Okay, I am here with Terry Severson, and Terry, you work with wildfires throughout the United States. You work as a consultant, you work as a specialist, you get shipped all over the country. For listeners out there, just tell everybody about your role and sort of how you've worked your way into it and sort of what you do now.
Well, back in the day when I started with the Forest Service, regardless of your position, whether you're with wildlife, timber, regardless, you always were responsible for fire suppression and firefighting. So it started, my first day, and before that, when I was in school, we did prescribed fires. So it's always been part of my career, and I constantly use fire as a tool, which has been really the hallmark of my career. And I've taught and burned and not only in North America, but also in Africa and Eastern Europe. So it's kind of what I've done my entire life. So that's basically it in a nutshell.
And so, as far as your current title, because you run a couple boards, you do a lot.
Yeah, I've tried to, I retired in 2023 from federal service. However, I'm still very much involved. We just moved to New York, so I'm involved with assisting on the Albany Pine Bush with their prescribed fires as a crew member. I'm part of the Alaska Incident Management Team that is mobilized to go to anywhere in the country to fight fire. And then I do consult a little bit overseas, and I think 3 trips to the Democratic Republic of the Congo, and then 1 to Eastern Europe. So it's, again, prescribed fire really is the thing that I'm passionate about, something that needs to be more widely accepted and used really throughout the world. So not just in the United States, for sure. And for a myriad of reasons. Not just simply hazardous fuels reduction, but other reasons as well.
So yeah, let's jump into that because I feel like that's a good sort of pivot point. And I'll set the premise with this is National Land Realty. We work with land throughout the United States. I live on the West Coast. Most of the people I work around are on the East Coast. Most of the time when I hear about fires on the West Coast, because every year since it wasn't as bad when I was a kid, and we'll probably get into climate change a little bit, but we're going to go the whole gamut. We're going to go like East versus West and climate change and everything. Like I want to touch every single thing I'm not supposed to touch right now. So when I talk to East Coast guys that work with land, it's usually, and guys and gals, I'll hear the remark, well, if you people out West could just figure out how to do prescribed burns, you wouldn't have these problems. that's usually the setting of the ground. Like that's usually the setting. And when I hear about it, I'm thinking about the land that's getting prescribed burn back east, and it's I don't want to say flat, but it's very not as hilly. Let's say that. There are topographical differences between the two areas. There are climate differences. There's a whole number of differences. But I want to go into that conversation of how much has been mismanaged, where are we at now, and what's going on. And let's single out California because, and we can probably go into Oregon because that entire coastline is going up like a blowtorch every single year. So what is the deal? Do we just need to prescribe burn the West Coast? Blanket statement.
Yeah, well, everybody wants a simple answer, and
right.
and it's not. I mean, I wrote down 9 things that I was kind of thinking about while I was waiting on our call here, and part of it is the gist of it really 1 through 9 is people. So even though they're all different kind of subject areas, it all revolves around people. People don't want smoke, and they have laws against prohibiting smoke production. People want to live in the WUI, which means they want to live in the woods. People plant invasive species that are taking over the country and allowing more of a fire hazard because they're fine fuels and they carry the fire. We as firefighters keep using fight. We're firefighters, but really we need to live with fire and learn from fire instead of fight it. We need to manage it. A lot of experts out there. Every time I put on the television, there's someone telling us how to do our job, and that's always a good feeling. And then there's risk. There's constant risk. And you're asking a GS7, a lower pay scale individual, to take on this risk that fire, and that's why I have a problem with controlled burns as opposed to prescribed fire, because they ask, well, why does a controlled burn? Why does it escape and burn down a house? Well, because it's not controlled. We set a set of parameters, which is the prescription that we're going to burn under, and then active nature happens. National Weather Service does a great job, but they're underfunded and lack of personnel, and so we may not get that information we need, and so something happens during that burning period that we didn't account for. And then our workforce, Mac, is just it's been depleted, and there's a bunch of people with gray hair like me, and then when you look past the gray hairs, there's not much in the tube that's coming up. So there's a number of reasons. I taught, and I continue to teach prescribed fire, but I taught at the National Prescribed Fire Training Center in Tallahassee, Florida for 17 years, and we had lots of folks from out west. It's not that they don't want to burn, it's that there's so many restrictions to burning. And then every time we have like a 99.3% success rate, but the ones everybody hears about are the 0.7 that escape and cause damage or just escape. To the point where I forget which state it was in, Oregon, Washington, that they arrested the burn boss after the fire had slopped over for like 30 acres or something like that. I don't have that information in front of me, but that's certainly scary that when they do that. I know I'm all over the place. So
no. But like you said, it's a really it's a complicated picture. It's not just, hey, if you guys would just prescribe burn, you'd be fine. Like there's a number of things. So I want to kind of start at the bottom. We went through 120 years of complete fire suppression.
I call it fire exclusion, but you can call
fire
it
exclusion. Okay, so how does that feed into this?
Oh, it's huge. So in the South, and I'm going to go all over the.
Yep, let's do it. We'll go all over the place.
But when in the South they call, if someplace has 10-year rough, that means it hasn't been burned for 10 years. Well, there's places out west that have 30 or 40-year rough. And that means there's 40, 50 years of fuel accumulation. And if you go in there and try to burn a large section or burn it the wrong time of year, then you're not only the fire has an opportunity to escape, but also whatever you were trying to manage, whether it be ponderosa pine, you may very well kill all those because the fire is going to be too hot. It'd be almost like one of the Western fires that are happening right now. So it's not a simple, to return prescribed fire, but like in the South, if we put a fire into a 30-year rough with longleaf pine or slash pine, most of the feeder roots are up within the first 12 inches of soil. So we would burn all those feeder roots off and we'd kill every stick of timber out there. Whether you believe in using timber or not is not the point, but you would just basically kill that entire stand. So what you have to do instead is go in the fall or winter, burn it under what we call cooler conditions, where we can manipulate the fire spread a little bit and make it so it's not as hot. So we'll take off maybe 2 inches and that's it. And then we'll wait till next winter, take off 2 more inches until we teach those roots to start going deeper. And then finally, we'll be able to introduce a spring burn, which is going to be the most beneficial for red cockaded woodpeckers that are endangered, and some of those critters that require fire somewhere in their life cycle.
So, and fire is historically has been, part of the process, right? Like even, there's been studies in the Amazon that show that burn patterns in the Amazon are the reason the place is so fertile and that they have fruit trees, and that there's that they find ash layers deep in the soil there where that place burnt the heck up several times over to make it what it is. And we haven't, and so how much did that, and I think it was like 120 or some years, that we really fought the fires. Like we didn't let them burn. How much does that fit into where we're at now?
Well, we do a lot of dendrochronology and look at fire scars on trees. And I just moved from Indiana to New York, and we had fire scars, going back to 1656 that showed anthropogenic fire, which means, man used fire. Native Americans have used fire for hunting, for medicinal plants, to fight their enemies. So we can't take humans out of it. Humans have been using fire for as long as there's been fire. So it's just one of those things. And it's in the East, where you think, it's not a very fire dependent ecosystem. We can actually, as humans, decide on what a forest is, especially in the East. So if you take fire out of the forest in the East, you're going to wind up through natural succession, Maple Beach. Pretty trees, beautiful trees, but as far as wildlife, as far as timber, the deer would have to bring their lunch into a stand of maple trees because they don't eat the little helicopter things. They want oak and hickory nuts. That's what they thrive on. Oaks have thicker bark. So whenever a fire would go through someplace in the East, it would favor the oaks, and it would not kill, but it would set back those other species, the maple and the beech and the others. They're still part of the system, but they're not the main part. The oaks are going to be it. So if you like oak furniture, if you like bourbon, where they use white oak for the whiskey barrels, then we have the ability to do that. So we use fire to maintain that level of succession. Same thing out west. If you want to maintain beautiful, that ponderosa pine stands were like just large trees, park-like settings, grass underneath, a few shrubs here and there along the waterways and wet areas. But other than that, it was just like a park. And now through, again, fire exclusion, where we took fire out of the ecosystem, now it's just chock full of shrubs and grasses, and where you cannot, or it'd be very difficult to suppress a fire in that area. So yeah, fire exclusion. We had the 10 o'clock rule, what the Forest Service came about in, I think, 35, where every fire has to be put out by 10 o'clock. Then we had, Smokey Bear did a great job. The Dixie Crusaders in the South did a great job. Again, all saying that fire in the forest is bad. But it probably from the 20s, some research in Florida, and it's again people, it's people driven. So in Florida, a bunch of rich tycoons from New York, they come down to Florida and they buy these large plantations for quail hunting. And they noticed after 10 years, their quail populations are dwindling, and so they're all upset. So they hired a professor from, I think it was Yale, to come down and figure it out. And he figured it out because they quit burning. So quail need that early successional growth, and everything was getting too grown up. And so they put fire back in the ecosystem, and then the quail population starts to rebound. So again, I wish there was a simple answer. Everglades have been burning since '58, I remember. And it's just the restrictions in the West are probably more so than anywhere else in the country, and it's part of the culture in the South. If there's you could literally drive down I-10 and during burn season and see probably 15 or 20 plumes, all prescribed fires for whatever management objective they're going for. And people are used to that. It's part of their culture. But you go other places, Midwest, out east, not so much, or the West. And so that people, if they don't want these huge conflagrations that we have now, then they're going to have to get used to a little bit more smoke in the woods under a prescribed conditions, where there'll be smoke for a day and then you're good, instead of having these fires go for months at a time.
So historically speaking too, I just living out west, the tale of Pulaski is like told often, and we had that fire in 1910 that whatever, it wiped out like 3 million acres or something like that, like somewhere in that range, like half of the coast. Is that sort of what inspired the fire exclusion practice? Is that like, did that freak everybody out enough to where they're like, no, that can't happen? And sort of what, and I don't know if you're, have dove into that much. I'm assuming from your history that you know a little bit about it. Did that kind of feed this? And was the situation that set that up unique? Like, why did that torch so much? Is sort of, is there anything to that?
Well, yeah, there's a great book, The Big Blow Up, 1910 Fires, where Pulaski pulled out his revolver and kept people safe in a cave. It's a great book, and and our tool is obviously named from him that we use. But no, so I always go back to 1871.
Okay.
Because that was the deadliest wildfire that ever occurred, and that happened at Peshtigo in Wisconsin. That fire is still the deadliest on record. At least 1,500 people dead, and because of census issues back then, they're not sure of the total. But it's kind of the same thing as the Big Blow Up. They had all these small little fires from people working in the woods, and then all of a sudden a wind event came, and then they were off and running. So it's the same kind of thing. Things just don't happen. Like all of a sudden it's just this huge thing. It was just all these small fires that were out there, and they were out there. Pulaski was out there trying to extinguish what they could. But then once a wind event, which mountain country, you get those extreme wind events. When they come in, there's nothing you can do but get out of the way, and that's what happened. And yeah, we look at that. We look at the destruction, and even so much. Press was given to Paradise when that entire town, or just about that entire town burned down. There's a great documentary about that called Bring Your Own Brigade, which is something scary that scares the bejesus out of me. But in that film, after the fire and the fatalities, and they tried they asked the people that were left there, they said, we'd like to have an ordinance to say you have to keep 10 feet of clear defensible space around your house. That means move your firewood away so that firefighters have half a chance to save your house. And that whole town voted it down, which is incredible to me. After the whole town basically burned down, all these new houses were being built there, and they said, no, we can't live with that. So
because we do not like to be told what to do.
We don't. We're this strong, independent people. We want our little 5 acres of paradise in paradise. And but then we have firefighters risking their lives to save those 5 acres, and we have to stop that because we get people hurt.
So going back into that 1910 event, you have your 9 bullet points there that all come down to people. Did that still come down to people as the cause?
Well, most certainly, because a lot of these were fires that, that from timber cutters and from folks out in the woods, or, machinery started a fire, but they said, oh, well, they start lots of fires, we let them go. And then the Forest Service, obviously it was started in 1905. So they only had a few years of getting people up to speed. And so they just didn't have the manpower or any of the machines to do that. They were just using shovels and picks and Pulaskis. They didn't stand a chance. And I've been on fires where they've taken off, running crown fires. And the one thing that I give us credit for in the fire community is we've given fire more acres. So we've backed off and we're kind of a little more, we're more smart about the whole idea of trying to keep this thing small. Let's be realistic and make it a bigger box that we can have.
I need you to clarify that, because a lot of our listeners had probably not ever seen or heard of a running crown fire. Tell us about that a little bit.
Well, I use it for I teach a class called firing operations, and it's how we use fire to fight fire, basically, and also for prescribed fire. It's a 2-pronged course. So I was on a fire in 2006 called the Jungle Fire in Montana, and I was we were given one house. I was on an engine. I was the engine boss with 2 other people on my engine. We were given a house to defend. So we set up a snap tank, a 2,000-gallon tank. We filled it off their stock pond. We put sprinklers around the house. Nobody was home. There was a caretaker, so we did have keys. So we went inside, moved things away from the windows that would burn, took all the propane tanks away from the house. And the fire was in a wilderness area that was very dangerous to get in. And so we waited. And so we had 2 choices at that point. We said, either when we think or hear from the helicopter that the fire's coming, we turn on the sprinklers and then we vacate as quickly as we can. Or the gentleman had an airstrip. I said, or we stay and hunker down while it passes us, and as soon as it passes us, we go to the house and see what's left, and try to save what is left. And so I was the engine boss. I made the decision to stay, and I said, as soon as we see fire crown that ridge, I'm gonna, you guys, the other 2, you guys start the sprinklers, wet down the ground, do what you can. I'm gonna take the engine, and we'll meet by the windsock in the middle of this grass field. And I said, I'm going to burn off this field. So as soon as we saw the fire, I stripped out put a line of fire in that field, and it sucked into that oncoming fire. And we all just stood at that windsock by the engine and watched this running crown fire go all around us. And it was probably the biggest education of my life. It was 10 o'clock in the morning. It got to be pitch dark, could not see your hand in front of your face. And the wind was, I wish I would have measured it, but I didn't have my Kestrel out. But it was just, I blew my hard hat off, blew some things off the engine. But it went all around. We could see the the glow of the fire and then kind of the outline of the cabin. And I was like, oh, there's no way that's going to be there. And that lasted probably, it seemed like an hour, but it was probably like 15, 20 minutes. And then one of my crew members, who was very green at the time, grabbed me by the shoulder and he said, "What's that?" And it was the sun peeking through that black smoke. We went back to the house, and the only thing that's lost is a little rail fence and one cracked window. The other houses that people had left, they didn't have that good safety zone we had. They left, they burned down to the ground. So running crown fire just means that fire is not on the ground. It's actually up in the crown of the trees, and it just runs along the crown from one tree to the next, and sometimes doesn't even engage the surface fuels. It just runs and runs faster than you could drive. So very impressive. And the thing that really made me question my judgment that day is that right in front of the cabin was a clawfoot tub that they used. They just had a hose in it for their horses and their livestock. And when we went back to that house, that clawfoot tub was gone, and we never found it. So it got sucked up into that vortex and put it down somewhere. And I thought the whole day, and kind of wakes me up at night thinking, wow, what if that thing landed on us? So,
and those things, because they're fast and they're explosive. That it looks like. My first experience with seeing that was when I was a kid. I grew up in a mountain town in Idaho, and the fires burned almost in the town. And it was 94 fire season. And I remember seeing a tree crown for the first time in my life. And it was like, did you see, there was an explosion on the side of that hill, because you would see flames shoot up and they're going up hundreds and hundreds of feet, and it's an explosion. And then you see several, and it just blows. It's a terrifying thing to see. And it happens out west quite a bit.
Right. It creates its own weather. So it's self-fulfilling prophecy, because it's creating all this wind, all this heat in this convection column. And as it goes up, it's sucking in more cool air from the bottom, and you just get all these in drafts and out drafts. And there's no stopping a fire like that. I mean, we can say we can all we want, but we need to be smart and not get in front of that, but look at a good place. We call them MAP points, management action points, where we can defend and again use fire to burn that fuel between the main fire and our control line, so it's. I think we're doing a better job of taking care of our people than we ever have, and that's good to see.
In terms of, because it is like that. If you talk to people that are out in rural areas or the cattle ranchers in the area that are kind of, some of them can be anti-fire, like you can't let that stuff burn into my area. But when we're talking management, like that has to be part of the management plan. Like you mentioned, 10 years of buildup is pretty significant. 30 years, 40 years of buildup is outrageous. Like you're probably going to lose every single bit of life in those areas when they finally do go. So what is sort of and back east, you want to do it every 4 to 5 years, right? Is kind of, I guess, between 3 and 5. Is that kind of the similar cadence that you want to see out west, that they would want to see to have a healthy forest that isn't susceptible to these giant blowups?
Yeah, I mean that's it. Again, we have a lot of control when it comes to how we manage our forests and what we want to see on the landscape. So it depends, usually, like at least with the Forest Service, I've worked for the Forest Service, Park Service, and Fish and Wildlife Service, all very different missions. But with the Forest Service, we have a land management plan, and that goes through public scrutiny. And so it's agreed upon of how the land is going to be managed. And fire is always part of that land management plan. And they usually put in there how many acres, the objectives for the burns. So and then we get sued. We get sued constantly, and for trying to do the right thing. And again, people, there are experts on both sides that like in the East, they say that, fire was never used, even though we have trees with fire scars on them. and they sue us from these different groups. And believe me, I'm an environmentalist, but we're sued constantly of trying to do the right thing. And it from when you're just thinking about it, like you're looking at an area, a stand, or whatever you want to call it, a forest, and let's say it's 1,000 acre block, and you say, well, I want to burn that for these objectives to meet my land management objectives. From actually thinking about it to actually putting fire on the ground is probably at least 7 years, probably more like 10 before that happens. So again, during those 10 years, what happens? More fuel buildup, maybe a wildfire in that area, lightning strike. So things change, but that land management plan is fluid. It can change somewhat, but again, it's part of it. I mean, it's the people's forest. So they have a say so, but it takes a long time to go through the NEPA process and to get that unit ready to be burned. So our process could probably, I like the process, don't get me wrong. It's just because I want input from folks that are the users, but I think it can be shortened up.
I was going to say there's a little bit of bureaucracy in that bureaucracy.
It is, and it's always been part of it. And then, like I say, even after and the forest plan is usually, good for 10, 15 years, but I know several that are in their 20 years, and it's such a lift to do a new plan for an entire forest that nobody is chomping at the bit to get one done. So it's really difficult. And then at the end, when you get the okay to burn, and then someone litigates and that'll shut you down. I mean, there's burns that I wrote the plans for in Indiana, probably in 2012, 2013, that still haven't been treated because of ongoing litigation.
Well, and let's talk about the differences in landscape and size of land. When you're looking at comparison of the East Coast versus West Coast, you have smaller parcels, there's smaller lots of land that build up, and then there's not a lot of vertical. So when you look at out West, when you're talking about giant swaths of land with vertical cliff faces for thousands of feet, how is that? Is it managed differently, or is it still just like, we're just going to let it go? And if you do it consistently enough, it's not a huge fire.
Yeah, and so the first thing is we never let it go. So there's a misnomer that when we had using air quotes the let burn policy, that people called it that, which is a horrible name, but because we had to manage those areas, because obviously they would get to a point where we had to corral it, move it, or suppress it if it was going towards populated areas. So there was never a let burn policy. It was manage fire correctly policy, if anything. But no, it's the difference. See, I'm a little bit different because the thing with the topography, mostly steep topography, you pretty much know what fire is going to do. It wants to run uphill. It's going to be hotter on the west and the south aspects, cooler on north and east, and fire preheats fuels. So I pretty much know that. Very rarely will wind overtake slope. Sometimes it happens, but usually it doesn't. Slope is going to dictate the direction of fire, mostly at night when you get the cooler air that rises. So two things, and see, that's why the difference to me are nil, because on one hand you have, like you said, these great big swaths. So a friend of mine can burn a 30,000 acre piece of ground and not bother anybody, because it's wide open spaces. There may be a cattle lease here or there. With some cattle you have to move around, but generally you can maybe burn from ridge to ridge or road valley to road valley. But then on the east and the Midwest, you have people everywhere. We have a hard time finding a place to put our smoke. So the smoke has to go somewhere. And so, we try to we try obviously to get it up and out and dissipate. But still, when you first start the fire, it's going to push it along the ground for a little bit before you get that good convection current going, or column going. So we have different challenges. We have people in the East and Midwest. We have, again, like you said, smaller. We have wind-driven fires, which can change. And the big thing there is that, like we're talking about these megafires and these huge conflagrations, that when those fires create their own weather, well, that happens on a prescribed fire as well. If you light that fire wrong and it's a flat landscape and those things come together at the wrong time, it's going to go over that line or it's going to spot across. So the playground, I think, is bigger out west. Not in all cases. I'm not going to, put everything in the same bundle.
There's always exceptions to everything. Like generally, we can do that. It's you know what.
But I mean, I know what my fire is going to do when it hits a mountain or topography and screes and different things like that. And so I think, I think they're both challenging. Anytime you set fire, you put the match on the ground, you're taking a heck of a risk, and we're asking folks to do that more and more, which we need to do it more and more. But we need to have public support to understand that they're going to have to, again, live with fire and not treat it as this beast that we have to tame, because we won't ever tame it.
So what about the belief that we haven't done anything out west? That the United States has just let the West go, and it's been this whole fire exclusion program forever and ever, and that it's unmanageable, and there's all this buildup. What has been done so far to handle things out west?
Well, I know for a fact, because one fire ecologist, she wrote a whole NEPA decision, which again is our law, for an entire region that incorporates prescribed fire. So I hear that too, that we mismanage the forest. And I don't believe that for a minute. What we do, what the people guide us to do, we do what the current administration tells us we have to do. So it's just too easy to play the blame game. I think they're doing what they can. And when folks used to come to the Prescribed Fire Training Center and they said it's difficult to burn because of X, Y, and Z, all these things. And I said, we can make all the excuses we want, but we have to look for reasons to burn. And you don't have to burn 10,000 acres. Start off with 20 acres, start out with 100 acres and just move the needle. And that's what we're asking folks to do, is just move that needle. And again, that interface between wildlands and urban areas that is so concerning now. I mean, that's really what we're concentrating on now, is creating fire breaks around those communities. And fire is the cheapest management tool that we have, but we can't use it everywhere. So we use masticating, we use heavy equipment, we use bulldozers, and all of that it costs a lot of money. And obviously, when you talk about aircraft on suppression incidents, then it really, the needle really goes higher. But so there's just, again, I'm hard pressed to blame some of the folks that I know personally that work out west that are trying to do the right thing. It's just, I'd like to see some of these folks that are doing that to come out there and light the match with us, and we'll see their eyes get big and see go the other direction. But
it's always easy to tell the team that you don't play on, in the sport that you don't play, in the area that you aren't, that they're doing it wrong.
It is, and I know for a fact that individuals are trying to move that. And then when you think about it, I mean, there's people like any other business that have been in that chair managing that land for 20 years, and they're looking at retirement, and there's no doubt that there's some that just say, well, why should I take that risk? And it's true because, is the government going to back you? Are you going to get arrested if you try to put fire on the ground? There's even more variables than there were 5 years ago, which is, and there were plenty back then. So it's concerning, and I feel for those folks because they really are really great civil servants trying to do the right thing.
Let's get into everybody's favorite topic when it comes to fire. Why is California going up so much?
Yeah, I mean, it's just all those things that we've talked about. I think it's probably, in my career, I've got a 30-some year career, and I should not see this amount of change in my career. It should take 100 years for things to happen that have happened in my career. I used to be done with fires in late August. Now, last year I was in till October. I mean, that's so climate change is definitely part of it.
I was going to say, are we going to have the climate change conversation? Are we going? Because I mean, what you told me before the podcast started is probably going to haunt me for a little bit, because I've been to the south coast of Alaska, the southern parts of Alaska, and you were telling me about because it is flat out rainforest there. Like, you can't go outside without getting wet, and it's always been that way. And you let me know that they now have a burn season and that they have a permanent fire crew. Like, maybe you can mention that here, but that blows me away.
Yeah, again, when I got out of school, after I came back from the Peace Corps and got out of school, I went to got a job on the Tongass National Forest, the largest national forest in our system, and stayed on Prince of Wales Island from May through October, November, something like that.
That is where I was.
Yeah, and lived there at Thorn Bay in the Ranger District, and flew every day to manage that forest. And again, like you said, it was raining every day. We wore tin pants and rain jackets, and then within the last 10 years, they have a permanent fire crew in the Southeast. And to me, a temperate rainforest with a fire crew just doesn't make sense. Don't get me wrong. I think when I was there, it was probably 2 or 3 little, clam bake fires on some island somewhere that we put out, but having a permanent. So, and that's what I'm saying is, like, I try to tell folks, I'm not a scientist. I never claimed to be one. I'm a practitioner, and I've been practicing this for a long time. And I've noticed the change in my short career of 30 years. And so it's happening. I can see it, that it's happening. My season is left. I got a call today. I'm leaving on Friday to go to Utah to be on another fire. So it's something that, again, no simple answer. Do we need it? I shouldn't say that fire is the answer. We just needed to do it safely and have clear-cut land management objectives in mind when we do it, not to appease some politician, but to do it right.
And you brought up invasives, and cheatgrass is a huge deal. Is it the biggest deal out that you see for fire, or is it but invasives, period?
Yeah, just across the board. I mean, they're taking it's so disheartening because, especially with cheatgrass. I remember the first time I was on a fire out west, and they flew us in by helicopter, and we're fighting this fire, and I'm like, what? Why are we not letting this fire do its thing? And it's because it was just pure cheatgrass, and it was going to be, if we unless we contained it, it was going to it would manipulate the ecosystem to create more cheatgrass. So that's why they had us suppressing that fire. So yeah, cheatgrass, a huge one. I don't know what the grass is in Hawaii but that was an introduced species that caused all those wildfires. And because you don't never hear wildfires in Hawaii. Right. And then the Southeast is just chock full of them, plants and animals. I mean, the snakes, and I mean, it can really, if you think about it too long, it probably ruins your day because it's bad. But yeah, there's certainly it's changing the fuel makeup in a lot of areas. I mean, you look at the Everglades with the eucalyptus trees that they planted to drain the swamps. Those things have real papery bark, and so they will definitely get the fire moving and keep it moving. And it's a huge undertaking to try to control those things when they've got a foothold, which a lot of them do.
There's a wildland fire guy out here that I talked to. This kid plays on my son's soccer team, but he was telling me, you were talking about invasives, and something that would never ever pop into my head for fighting fires was he had gone to Texas to fight a fire out there, and they were moving along, and they all got called off because a lion had been sighted. Because somebody had an African game preserve for hunting or something out there, and a fire got loose, and they had wild lions running around with the firefighters that they had to get the heck out, couldn't fight the fire because there were invasive lions in the invasive grass that was now on fire.
And that's what I'm telling you, Mac, that my whole if I had a PowerPoint presentation, it'd have one slide, it would say people, because people do the damnedest things. And it's just, I mean, the feral hogs, they did the same thing with them, brought them from overseas. And now there's a couple species, the Terray tree in Northwest Florida. And that's arguably one of the rarest conifers. And those hogs come down there and just root them all up. Like, it looks like you've been there with an excavator because they do so much damage. And again, people get them, and then people want them because they like to hunt them and they like the meat, but they do such damage. Anytime you bring in something that wasn't native to this country, it screws things up. And, like horses, like cows, I like meat, beef too, but, we tend to let some of them stay because we like them, but the rest, we need to get rid of them. So yeah,
you're going to lose control eventually. It just depends on how that's going to affect the landscape around it. Because to your point on hogs, like Hawaii, the impact of hogs and goats on Hawaii, or Easter Island, right? Easter Island has a huge hog population now or something.
Yeah, it's crazy, and we do our best, like on forest or refuges or parks. We identify the invasive species, we treat them. But again, if your neighbor doesn't do the same thing within a year, they're back again because people haven't quite all bought into it that these things are bad. So yeah.
So we have changing conditions, we have invasive species, and we have to overcome 100 years of fire exclusion. When you're talking about the firestorms that we've been seeing out west, and they've been getting worse. And we've been seeing those in California and Oregon especially. Is there anything that can be done? And let's throw on the glass ball here. Like, I know I'm asking you like a terrible question here, but is there anything that can be done in Oregon and California that could actually alleviate what we're seeing? Is it just consistent burning, or is there management practice in? Because I mean, how are you going to manage 10,000 acres of public land in the middle of nowhere? Like, what can be done for that to stop sort of these catastrophic events?
Yeah, I think we have to really, focus. Don't lose sight of all of that, but focus on those areas that are in the interface, and really put those areas under management, which a lot of them are. I'm not saying they're not, and then put them on a rotation of prescribed fire. And I'm not sure what exactly their rotation is, 3 to 5 years, to return fire to that ecosystem. But that's the shortcut answer is focus all of our attention to those areas, but also realize that as you're focusing on that, you still have more fuel build up, but create those buffer zones, if you will, around those areas. Because again, folks are moving, closer or inside the forest, and it puts more firefighters at risk when they have to protect those communities or those individual houses. And other than that, I mean, I think it's more attitudinal than anything, that we have to change people's mind towards their attitude towards fire. if they realize that, like they do in Australia, that fire is part of the natural process. And so how do we live within that natural process? Well, we either burn under conditions that are favorable for us, or we have a wildfire that burns under conditions that are not favorable and that we have a difficult time of suppressing that fire. So I mean, I wish I had a crystal ball and a better answer for you, but I think we need to focus on the areas without losing sight of the management that needs to be done throughout the national forest system, as well as parks and refuges. And they're doing great. I mean, again, 99% success rate. Fish and Wildlife, I mean, that's their gig. They're burning these waterfowl production areas and these areas that they're dedicated to managing really well. They're doing a great job. And it's all those myriad of things I said about laws, attitudes, politicians, and then folks that are against taking just baby steps to make themselves safer.
And you rattled off something earlier, then I feel like I overlooked it and I kind of thought about it for a couple of seconds. And you mentioned that cheatgrass in particular, you said something to the effect of fire makes cheatgrass go more. Is that?
Well, it's just creating more area for it to seed into.
Okay. Yeah. I was just like, okay, so fire, I was always kind of like, well, maybe you could just burn it all out, but no. You're also creating bare ground and opportunity.
Yep. Yeah, that's the problem. I don't think they've figured out yet how to eradicate cheatgrass. I'm not sure they ever will.
I don't think they ever will. Because in the area that I look at all the time is the Klamath Valley in Oregon. Like, I think that place goes up every single year, and it's covered with grass, right? Like, it's just like there's that grass everywhere, and it's hot, it's dry, and that was the first time I think I can think of that's like consecutive years of burn. Like, it's just, I've never even heard of that. So it's just one of those things, right?
Yeah. And, we burn a lot of tallgrass prairie in the Midwest too. And that stuff, again, tallgrass prairie, big blue stem, little blue stem, Indian grass. It's all, stuff that can be 6 feet tall. And we burn that. And we're managing this particular ecosystem because it's kind of rare now, because all the good prairie land went to farms, and they're creating food for us to eat and ship overseas. And so so now these small postage stamps prairies have huge fuel loads of prairie grass, and we may burn them every 2 years, depending if there's invasives in there. But again, are we creating more of a fire hazard? But we're also perpetuating an ecosystem that we'd rather not see it disappear from the landscape altogether. So again, every place is so different. And when it's funny because people's minds go different places. And like when I went overseas, the first thing they wanted was a fire management plan in Africa and the DRC and this. And then I said, well, what are you doing with this land? Well, we don't know. And I'm like, well, you need to have a land management plan first. What are your objectives for this? And then we wrap in fire with it. Then we wrap in training. Then we wrap in, live fire exercise. But we always, as humans, we shoot for this overarching thing. But if we break it down into little parts, and again, burn your little 100 acres in California or your 100 acres in the Klamath, then you move the needle. Talking about it doesn't move the needle. And they do that, but we just need to support those folks and give them more folks to get that work done.
That makes sense. And where is it? You just got called out to a new one?
So he just told me Utah. I don't think he told me the fire. I'll get my order probably tomorrow. I'll fly out on Friday.
Got you. Okay. Well, stay safe.
You bet.
Number one and first and foremost. But no, I've been wanting to go into this topic for a long time, and it was just finding the expert that could talk to it and walk us through it, because there is always this Monday morning quarterback kind of belief on how people should handle it. And it's I always, I'm a pretty firm believer. If you want the worst idea possible, let politicians tell you how to handle it. And because there's a lot of politics involved, and we've become more divisive on, oh, well, you said that, so I need to oppose that because you're a different political party. And it's like people are just not playing together. But when it comes, fire doesn't care what you do or who you say, and it doesn't matter on that front. There's good handling and there's bad handling. So I'm really happy to have you on here and talk about this and kind of walk people through. It's very, very educational.
Well, I appreciate it. I appreciate calling me an expert, but again, practitioner. I'll go with practitioner.
Works. You can't control fire, I guess.
Yeah. But I will, say this, that I know a lot of folks that work out west, and they want the best for that forest. They love that forest, and they're trying their best, and they tend to be hamstrung by politics and what folks want, and we don't claim necessarily to be experts, but we've been doing this a while, and if they and to be quite honest, our workforce has been slammed so hard that we probably don't even have the people now to be able to do it. And again, there's nobody in the pipe that's coming down because all those people were let go as well, all the young firefighters. So it's kind of sad, but the folks they love their job. They love managing ecosystems for the American people, and they're doing like I say, a fantastic job under adverse conditions.
I was going to say the life of a wildland firefighter. There's the upsides are maybe the exercise. But it's not something you're going to do unless you love what you're doing, who you're doing it for, and the outdoors. It's not a cush job.
No, it's funny. When I first started, it was, these fire camps have made some improvements over the years, but they used to have like one phone, and you'd all stand in line to make that one call home in 14 or 21 days, sometimes 30 days. But you sleep in the dirt for 2 or 3 weeks, and then work 16-hour days, and then come home, take 3 days off, and then you're available again. And I told my wife when I retired, I said, it's something that kind of gets under your skin. And I said, I can't just stop cold turkey, so I'll have to glide into retirement and fight fire for a few more years.
Well, thank you for all the things that you've done, and thank you for your continued efforts. Terry, thank you very, very much. This is super, super cool. Like I said, this is a topic that I've wanted to jump all over for a good long time now. And so I'm glad we found you. Love to have you on again sometime. But you got a busy summer ahead.
No, anytime I can fit in, I love talking fire. It's a great profession. I've enjoyed my career, and it's ongoing. So thank you very much.
Ongoing. Yeah. Yes. Thank you. This concludes episode number 147. And if you listen to this all the way through, you'll know exactly why I pushed to the front. This is a fantastic episode with a lot of information. Now, if you like what you've heard here today, if you're on YouTube, subscribe. If you're listening to the podcast, subscribe. You don't want to miss our next episodes. We do a really good show here. I'm not just saying that because I host, because my team does a lot of the work behind the scenes, and I'm very, very proud of their efforts. Subscribe to this podcast. You don't want to miss our next episodes. Thank you, and I'll see you next time.